Welcome back to Divine Decode, a space where we slow things down a little deeper and explore the intelligence that lives beneath the noise of everyday thinking. I am Pragya, and I'm really glad you're here today. So much of our lives are spent fixing, you know, they may be fixing habits, fixing emotions, fixing ourselves, even sometimes. And we are taught that growth comes from identifying what's wrong and working tirelessly to improve it. And while that approach can feel responsible, doable, and even noble sometimes, it can also quietly keep us exhausted and stuck in the situation and the loop. Today's conversation invites a different way of seeing what if the reason we feel trapped is not because we haven't solved enough problems, but because we are living inside a mindset that constantly needs one. And in this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Rochelle Vogt, who is a PhD and whose work challenges the deeply ingrained problem solution orientation and opens the doorway to something more subtle and powerful: conscious creation. A way of change that does not come from struggle or self correction, but from accessing a deeper intelligence within us, and one that existed long before we learned to analyze ourselves, question ourselves, and put us into situations and loops. And this is not a conversation about doing more, but it's about listening differently and perhaps remembering something we never actually lost. I'm so sorry I spoke a lot, but thank you, Dr. Rochelle. Thank you for being on the show. And it's an honor hosting you today. And I love whenever there are guests who come up, who talk about conscious creation, and they talk about very simplistic things wherein people can actually follow, and those are not 15 guidelines that are given. But I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I hope you enjoy it too.
Yeah, I'm sure I will. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. So to start with, Dr. Rochelle, you distinguish conscious creation from a problem solution orientation, and I've mentioned it. And I want to know your perspective. So, from your perspective, how does constantly framing life as something to fix quietly keep people, operating in survival mode? So, how is that survival mode happening, and how is the whole healing process over there? So, I want to know your perspective on it.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, I think that in today's world, we're so continually bombarded with media that is trying to grab our attention, and often they're trying to grab our attention over something we can relate to, which is often a problem that we're having. It could be a health problem, a relationship problem, a financial problem. So it's only natural that our consciousness is tied up in a lot of this thinking about, oh, I have this problem to fix and that problem. And the issue with that sort of ongoing thing is, first of all, every time we solve one problem, there's always going to be another. We could even just look in different areas of our life. Well, we could feel like, oh, we're getting our health on track, but now I need to work over here on relationships or my job. Or so it makes us feel like we're never really where we want to be because there's always something to focus on. And it sort of diffuses our energy out over the course of or the areas of our life and dilutes our potency. And I think that when we tie our identity to being a good problem solver, which is often how we're rewarded in our families and our societies, one of the first things I learned in one of my early jobs is you don't go to your manager with a problem unless you have some solutions you can suggest because you really want to be seen as the someone who's thinking ahead and position yourself as a leader. And so we're rewarded for that kind of thinking, and it has its place. And it's important to have that kind of discernment in certain situations to understand where there are problems and where we need to bring certain things to bear to fix a situation at work or something like that. But when we are telling ourselves there's a problem with everything in our lives, I have to fix this and fix that, we're constantly giving our nervous system the message that it's not safe. So that sends us into always being in a more sympathetic dominant state. So then we're not in our parasympathetic rest and digest. And we tend to start to even our biochemistry and our neurochemistry starts to see everything as a threat and a problem. And that just puts us in that loop. And so I think one of the reasons that nervous system regulation has become so popular and there's more awareness about it is people are realizing that they are always on alert. And we have to have these tools now to kind of come into center, come back to our breath, come back to the moment. And I think that that gets us a certain distance, right? But if, again, we're seeing our nervous system being activated as a problem, we're still in that loop of trying to fix the problem and telling ourselves that something is wrong instead of saying, okay, there's a particular environment. Um, I'm identifying myself not as a problem solution, um, a problem fixer, but as a creator. And I'm going to get present and understand what it is I want to create and orient toward that point in time. And that helps us align to it. And it helps us understand now what is between me and that creation and what resistance is showing up. And we can really fine tune. Maybe there are parts of ourselves, that maybe there's an inner protector self that doesn't feel comfortable with that creation you want. A great example is someone who's working um, to develop more business success and they want to speak, they want to get out in the world, but their protector controller remembers when they were, second or third grade or, around, sometime in those early years and they were presenting their little project at school and everybody laughed and that's still playing. That tape is still there in our subconscious mind and that protector controller does not really want to go out on stage and it believes that piece of you believes that it is protecting you and it's a very important job. And so instead of making it wrong, we can work to remove the specific resistance. And so using different tools that to go back and take the emotional intensity out of memories and help build rapport with those parts of ourselves that might be in resistance to what we want to create. So that's more like joining and gathering and marshaling resources toward a goal versus like problem solving. It's a subtle shift, but a very important one.
Yes, I totally, totally get that. And thank you for sharing that with us. Because as you said, we often um, trained this way, or if not trained, we're grown this way, that if you have a problem, come up with a solution yourself and, then let us know, you know. Sometimes even in the stratas where I can relate to, for example, we are debating on a topic, right? Sometimes you're just reporting a problem to the larger audience, but then the audience also expects you to come with a solution. And that is a problem that a lot of people, they just stop that, okay, I don't want to debate on this because I don't have a solution for this. I just know the problem. And that is a primary prerequisite to the thing. And the shift is actually very striking. And thank you for sharing your story with us and making it so easy for us again. Now, when we talk about your own awakenings, so it involved uncovering a pre verbal trauma. And many people, they gain insight into their patterns, yet, nothing fundamentally changes. So, for example, if there is this individual who knows, okay, that these are the patterns that are, recurring and these are the patterns that are observed. But then there are no fundamental changes after that realization. So, why does understanding alone so often fail to create a change in that fundamentality of that particular situation? And if you have, an anecdote to share with how to also change that. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I think if I'm following, you're just wondering how sometimes bringing awareness can help us discern where the root of some of those blocks are, and then how we can make those shifts. Does that sound like I'm picking up the trail there? Okay. Yeah. So for me, um, my experience was very surprising, because I had no knowledge or awareness about um, womb twin loss, and until I learned about it, and then it was like the whole world stopped. And I'd like to say it was just like, oh, I had the awareness and was able to just figure out and place the pieces and then move on. But really, it proceeded to be a couple of decades of just sort of, realizing how potent this was, and it led to a lot of really interesting, inquiry about consciousness, our understanding of what consciousness is, the soul, when does that come into play? Led me into past life inquiry. It led me down a lot of paths. And I think all of those were important and very enriching in terms of informing how I want to work with people and how I can sort of broaden my scope. And I think that that's a piece of my journey that, even though I've gone through the training and have the advanced degree, I know that in doing that, you tend to get a focus. And when you really go out into the world and work with people, I think it serves them more not to just be stuck in the specifics of like a clinical orientation, but really to broaden your scope to see someone as truly an individual, as truly, a soul on a journey. And there are so many paths, and we're all here for so many reasons. There's not one prescribed answer, and that's where you get into, cultivating the intuition, cultivating the discernment, and then bringing, your body of work or your study into, as a tool in the broader scope of things. So I learned, that I wasn't alone in the womb, and confirmed this with my mother back when I was, at that point. They didn't do a lot of scans, so, it was other than them telling her that she probably had more than one, um, baby, growing in her, they didn't really have a lot of concrete knowledge, like they do now. A lot of people would be more aware of that. But it really surprised me, the level of grief. And of course, we could go down the rabbit hole of like, well, what was the maybe potential past life connections with this soul? Why, or if you look at um, some people believe we sign up for these things. We made the arrangements beforehand. So if that's the case, what was the lesson? And I do believe that there were a lot of lessons in it for me, because had I not had that experience, I would certainly not have the empathy that I have toward how powerful, these experiences that our consciousness has. We don't like often think in mainstream culture of a fetus having a broad but deep awareness. We sort of track when different aspects of their body develops and then extrapolate that to some meaning. But I think that when the potency of my experience was kind of evolving and unraveling and getting some insight on it, I was like, this is a rich experience that you wouldn't think just a developing fetus would have. So that made me understand how powerful our consciousness is, how the energetic components of it are really important, and also just helps me really transfer that to how can I help people who have that experience of something kind of almost a pattern that's stuck, but also just a deep perspective that they can't really put words to. And when we can use tools like the MAP method that I work with people on, and go into these places pre-verbal, into the womb, even past life, or just the multidimensionality of our experience, right? And we can work on the super conscious level to help essentially clear and shift and definitely take the emotional intensity out, suddenly something that was so almost like a cloud, can be lifted. And then all of a sudden there's more understanding, more clarity. And it was a really potent experience for me. And so, bringing that awareness to helping others is something I'm really passionate about because sometimes we don't know why we have a block. And if we just see it as a problem, it's not nearly as rich of an exploration as if we just um, understand what we're wanting to create and see what comes between us. And for me, so many things that I wanted to create in my life were connected back to this grief of a soul that I felt like I was supposed to have alongside me in this life and didn't. So it kind of comes full circle to understanding how we can look at traumatic experiences, take from it what we can, but not relive it and be stuck in it and use tools so that we can remove the emotional intensity but keep the wisdom. And that's the really powerful piece. Because if we accept that belief that perhaps we signed up for all of these things, then the question is, what can I learn from it? And how is it in service of me?
I love that approach, and that's so important to realize that your traumas are not your entire personality, and those are not the loops that you have to live in. As you rightly mentioned, that you can always uh, think about what you have to take from that. Traumas do teach you something, and firstly, I would appreciate your spirit through it, and how firm you stood with it, and all the learnings that you've taken from it. Because we don't realize this, but our traumas and our learnings and everything um, that happens to us or that is around us, and whatever we take from it is what shapes us, and that reflects in you, and how you have actually taken this perspective, and that's wonderful. I love it. Thank you for sharing it with us, and I hope our listeners also resonate with that. To move on, you speak about the unconscious, as an intelligence which is beyond the subconscious. And I want to know, how does this challenge the way traditional psychology it understands healing and change? And there are so many theories give Sigmund Freud very popular, and other psychologists who have given out their theories on this. So I want to know about, what is your perspective on how superconscious and unconscious it deals with, and how is it different from traditional way of dealing with healing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that the even the idea of the superconscious is one that's been around for a while. I mean, Carl Jung talked about the collective unconscious, and we could kind of see, as we expand our understanding of what consciousness is, we can kind of look at these old theories and sort of broaden our scope. And so the superconscious it's an aspect of us. It is um, a non-judgmental, non, it doesn't have an agenda, except that it is a part of the mission of the subconscious mind to keep us safe, to keep us alive. But in that sense, the superconscious field is and I do kind of call it a field and not like just an aspect of self, because I think that's where Jung was going, that we're all connected in some way. So we have a consciousness, we have a self-conscious awareness, we have the unconscious, and then we have the superconscious that kind of, if you will, is above that in that sense. And it is a place where our programming lies. And this programming, as you know, and as your listeners know, is very connected to our cultural and societal. And that's where Jung was going with that collective unconscious aspect. So if we have a superconscious field that we can uh, utilize to help shift our own programming and our own experience, it is um, a powerful tool and ally. And I think that this also was really illuminated in Dr. Flint's work, Dr. Gary Flint, who created a lot of the foundational aspects of what is now called the MAP method. He really discovered working with a lot of people with pretty severe trauma, that there was this ally, there was this almost other personality aspect that we ultimately call the superconscious in the work now that really is there, and can be engaged with to help make these shifts. It's like a programmer sitting there that you can say, hey, that whole experience, excuse me, that whole experience there and all that emotional weight, let's clear that. And the point of it being there is it's like a track or a record of our lives. But when we can actually find a way to give commands to the superconscious to clear, and redirect, it's amazing the power of it. And I think that's it. Is just it's so powerful. We can give these commands to help release the emotional intensity, to help shift, and connect to more positive states. And why wouldn't we be using that ally? Why wouldn't we want to tap into that? So I think that the work that he did, really laid the groundwork for us to understand that there is this other ally, and it's also separate from all of our parts. The parts work like with the internal family systems. It is an overarching aspect of our consciousness that we can work with, and it can help organize and align and also help redirect some of the intensity that those parts might be carrying in terms of their traumas.
Thank you for making it easier for us, and that's so beautiful, to know about the unconscious and conscious and how they also help in um, the part of healing wherein we realize that okay, this has been suppressed down there since a long time. It needs to come up, and you need to think about it a bit. And thank you for that again. And at the last, I want to know when someone they feel worn down after years of self work, burnout, therapy, effort, and everything that they put into their healing process. What tells you that they're ready to shift from fixing into creator mode? And also, you know, we've explored a lot today. So I want to know if, listeners, they take away just one shift from this conversation. What would you like them to take today? Because I feel they should take everything. But then again, that one simple practice that you want them to, follow, or, yeah, followed by the question.
Absolutely. I think that um, first of all, that it's really true that we've had a lot of different approaches to doing work. And so many people, I almost can use personal development and self help as another way to punish themselves and to really like overextend themselves. So if you're stuck in that loop, or you really are trying to achieve something and you keep kind of oscillating, you make some progress and you fall back, or you make some progress, something happens. A lot of people have this with money. They'll make money, then they lose it, or they give it all away, and they're stuck in a loop. Same thing can happen with health, with relationships. So if you're stuck in that loop, the first thing to do is, um, number one is to have those daily skills that you are developing that help you with your nervous system. That could be mindful awareness, breath. So that's the first thing. So you're able to actually control the state that you're in, and you're not constantly allowing everything that's coming in just to knock you off center. So once you're grounded and centered, you do have to ask yourself, and this changes through our different life stages, but what is it that I really want here? What is it? And that's sometimes just asking the tough question, helps us get at what we're trying to create. Sometimes once we understand what it is we're really trying to create, other things fall away, and we can have, that deeper discernment about what it is that's really going to fuel, our passion, our desire, something that's really going to make us feel fulfilled. Once we have, that true answer, that true choice, we can orient toward that choice stand between us and that. And that allows us, again, to build that rapport with those parts that might be in opposition to what we're wanting to create. And the number one thing that I would suggest people do is a basic neuro emotional technique. It's a neurophysiologic as well. You take a couple minutes each day for each goal, each creation that you're working on, and you actually put yourself there. The brain doesn't distinguish between real or imagined. So if you go into that meditative state using the imagination, you're really allowing that rehearsal to enhance and bring about that end result. But the most important thing in doing that, and again, when you do it, you're in that space. You put yourself 6 months into the future. You've accomplished what it is that you're trying to create, and you breathe with the lungs of that person. You see with the eyes of that version of you. You experience whatever it is that's, could be just playing out a day in the life 6 months down the road where this thing has manifested. You've created it. And by doing that, you are giving a beautiful experience to the nervous system to tell it that that's safe. It's safe for me to create that because I've already lived it. You've literally already lived it. And, we could get into all these interesting discussions about the field and how we actually create, but we're really literally creating it. You've created a spot in the field now that you're orienting toward where this creation exists. And as you allow the nervous system to accept that and excuse me, and those parts that might be in resistance, they can kind of reorient and they realize that it's safe. You actually will have more success working toward that creation. So it's literally this experience of daily exposure to that imagination, that place where you can create it and it's safe. And that's telling the nervous system, oh, I can create this. I've got the go ahead. I've lived through it because I've imagined it at that deep level.
That is so, so beautiful. And I totally love that and I totally agree to it because, sometimes, again, it's those simple things where we just have to sit back and relax and ask us the questions that are actually required to be answered. And nobody will answer that apart from ourselves. And thank you for making all of us realize that. And listeners, what we explored today is not a method to master or mindset to perfect, but it is an invitation to soften the constant inner fixing that we keep on doing and to trust that there is an intelligence within you that does not need to be managed, right? And conscious creation is not about becoming better at solving yourselves or coming out with, solutions every time. It's about remembering that you were never broken to begin with. And if something in this conversation resonated with you or even unsettled you, let that be okay because sometimes clarity does not arrive as answers but as a quiet pause, and where the old questions no longer feel necessary and there are new questions that suddenly feel necessary to you. And maybe the most powerful shift begins when we stop asking what is wrong with me and instead we gently wonder what is ready to emerge, and what do I want, and what can be done. Thank you for spending this time with me on Divine Decode. I am Pragya, and I'll see you in the next conversation, right where wisdom meets lived experience.